All right, everyone. Thanks for waiting.
I'm so sorry, everybody. Excusez-moi.
This is Natalie from the UK. I'll go back to introducing you in a couple of minutes. Thanks again for making the trip to Paris, even if it's a short trip.
Yes. I
There's
love
a glass
Paris.
of water for you.
Thank you so much.
This is a conversation for any data enthusiast here, but also anyone wondering about what ESG means in terms of enterprise transformation in general and technology transformation in general. You'll see that the topic we want to cover today is how do ESG imperatives reinforce data-driven transformations? We're actually wondering whether we could have phrased this the other way around, because I think that's also very, very true in the way that how do data in general is going to assist or help ESG transformation more broadly. So let's get started, because I don't think we got much time. My name is Romain Lamotte. I'm a partner at KPMG in France. I'm leading the data practice here. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome Natalie here. Natalie is in charge of ESG innovation in general. I mean, it's more than innovation, right? It's more innovation in data and technology.
Exactly.
Would you like just to say a couple of words about yourself?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, yes, I work across all sectors around ESG. I'm a technologist by heart. I love data. And I guess, you know, for me, I'm very passionate about ESG and sustainability. I do believe that, you know, well, we can make a huge difference leveraging data to help our organizations around the world actually transition to a more sustainable future. So that's why I'm here today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Natalie. Let's get started. And the first question I'm going to ask you, which is a question we often get from lots of clients, is what does ESG means for me as a company, and how do I get a view of risk? And also, while we're preparing this talk, we're reflecting on some of the requests we get, which are very often reporting related. They say, how can I get a report on my ESG risk? And your point was saying, well, this is missing the point.
Exactly. So I think, you know, there is that maybe reaction. Oh, I need to do some reporting. Let me just do that and get the data to do that. But actually, you know, ESG is much, much deeper than this. It really requires organizations to review and reconsider what are they doing as a business, and what is their point of the, you know, how are they actually going to contribute to sustainable outcomes, and what's material, and materiality is a real topic in ESG, what's material to their business. And, you know, by doing that, Romain, I think what we talked about was if a business is clear about what's important to them and to their business, then you don't boil the ocean by looking for every data that there is out there. You look at exactly what you need to help guide you to the future that you're trying to define for your company. So this is not just a data issue, it's a strategic issue, and actually, I think we also talked, for some companies, it's an existential issue.
And I think, we'll get back to that for sure, because I think that's a pivotal question really in terms of ESG, much broader than data. Going back to data, mostly so there's this usual reporting question. We're saying, wait a minute, you need to understand what ESG means for you in any material way, and for you as a company, but also for you as any various stakeholders, one of them being the regulator. There are a number of, you know, regulated industry out there, so obviously keeping this in mind as well, and trying to get a sense of what are the risks in relation to ESG, what are the opportunities as well?
Yes. And I think that's the thing, is that, you know, we need to think about, there are huge opportunities. This is actually a major transitional moment for our planet, right? And actually, you know, businesses can benefit from this, you know, by both making this a sustainable outcome, but actually promoting their business into the future, right? So there is a real opportunity. We can't just think of this as a risk. Yes, there is the risk, and we have to deal with some pretty significant risks. I mean, look at the temperature today. I think it's, you know, indicative of the risks that we are facing, but yes.
So as an executive, I may be working in marketing, I may be working in risk management, maybe working in finance, maybe working in supply chain. I'm doing that particular assessment of ESG risks and opportunity. Most of them will have a data implication, right?
Yeah.
Be it at the core, maybe develop new services, maybe rethink my supply chain, maybe, well, think about reporting, which is still an issue.
Yeah.
What kind of, and I guess that's our second question, what kind of challenges is this going to drive just in terms of data?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's lots of challenges here that we need to recognize. I mean, one is, a lot of companies obviously operate in today's world in a global environment, right? So, and most organizations think and operate across many jurisdictions. There's going to be different jurisdictional requirements around data. Unfortunately, they're conflicting in some cases. That's just one angle to it. I mean, I guess in terms of other challenges, the fact is that normally, as an organization, you can think about your business strategy, how I'm going to progress my business strategy, and get all the data I need to support my business. ESG requires you to actually understand the business of your suppliers and your customers more than ever before, and you need to get the data and get your suppliers and customers to collaborate with you to get data and to achieve targets together, because you're responsible for your sustainable supply chain and your entire value chain, which is not something that organizations are used to dealing with.
Very true, and I can link this to a very typical data governance challenge that we're usually facing, and a lot of our clients are rethinking data governance today as to how to find ways to properly identify data, understand their own internal data sources, maybe catalog them in some way, maybe making them accessible. What we're talking about now is, well, you need to do that, but you also need to do that for any other external data that may be relevant in terms of ESG for you. That is, maybe open data, maybe other paid data, but also data from your suppliers, maybe data from your customers. So there's a new ecosystem really that needs to be rethought in terms of accessing data, understanding data, and getting data under control, right?
Exactly. And actually, I'm going to use a phrase in my broken French. Qu'est-ce que je donnerais pour des bonnes données about ESG? Because it's very difficult to get good data relating especially to outside of your own organization. I mean, it's already hard enough, but getting from your suppliers, even from third-party data sources, they are not readily available, they are not consistent, the accuracy is poor. So this is a very big challenge right now, and it requires a lot of collaboration to be able to source the data from first principles, actually. You can't just buy it.
And sourcing is one thing, but capturing the data, I'm just thinking,
yes.
Some challenges we're having is just capturing data, for instance, at production sites where today certain data may not be captured in terms of emissions. So there's almost a new data life cycle that needs to be rethought in terms of understanding the data we need, finding that data if the data exists, but if it doesn't, then finding ways to approach it, capture it in some ways, and then govern it as any other data source that you'll get, so that you can make proper use of it.
And I think, Romain, you hit on a really important topic there, that to govern this data, because it's new data that doesn't currently exist, it actually requires, and I know we're going to come to this, transforming your operating model, because there is no ownership for that data right now. Who's going to accept the ownership and responsibility about that data and care about it? This is also a thing. Organizations have a big business change challenge around ESG, because how do you motivate everybody to understand what their role is in the whole end-to-end data value chain to achieve those sustainable outcomes for the organization?
Just moving on from that point, and that covers really the last point. What we're saying is that the extent of change and maybe the extent of data implications of this change will vary greatly from one company to another, maybe from one sector to another, and I think we need to recognize that the range of transformation or the volume of initiatives that needs to be started around ESG from a data standpoint as well, from plenty of other topics, but at least from a data standpoint, is going to be extremely different from one company to another.
It is. It's different from one company to another, and also, you know, even within any given sector, they, you know, a company might say, well, what's my competitors doing? But actually, the fact is, none of them have an answer yet, right? So they're all looking for the answers. And I guess coming back to the role of data, data needs to help inform that investigation into what should be the roadmap for the future, what should our transition path be. That's got to be fueled by data.
And we're talking about operating models, but obviously you would have understood by now that in some sectors, the change will be a lot more profound than this. So we're talking changes of business models, really, maybe change of existential changes. As you know, some obvious. If you're working in the oil and gas sector today, as we were discussing before,
yes,
you probably need to rethink what your future business model is going to be. In some ways, data will help you do that in terms of appreciating your strategy, in terms of appreciating your value proposition to your various customers. If you're in the banking sector, obviously, some of the changes, banking, asset management, typical examples today that have very significant impact from an ESG standpoint. We tend to think a lot of the regulatory aspect first, maybe the first reporting aspect first, because these are the questions that fall on the teams at the moment and say, well, again, give us some answers, give us some data. But I guess your point is, sure, let's do this, but also let's include this as part of a wider conversation in terms of business model transformation, operating model transformation.
Exactly, because if you know what your future business model is, then you'll realize that you might need entirely different data. I have an oil and gas client, I won't name them, whose strategy is going to be from becoming one of the biggest oil and gas companies in the world to becoming the biggest electricity company in the world. Yes, that's going to be their new strategy. Imagine the change of the data that's required to manage that new business. It's crazy. So, it's really by understanding that end, future business operating model, then from a data perspective, we are able to then actually pave the way for that outcome to happen.
Brilliant. I think, listen, we actually have time for questions,
Great.
believe it or not. If anybody
Amazing.
had told me this 5 minutes ago.
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
How do you help your customers to get those data?
Oh, well, lots of ways, really. Firstly, as I said, there are some publicly available sources of data. We help our clients to actually understand what they are, depending on which part of the problem they're trying to solve. So first we understand where is the publicly available data. Then there is data sources that are maybe not so publicly available, but that you can start to obtain, like, satellite-related information. So there's, other data sources that you can obtain through more sensory kind of mechanisms. And then thirdly, we help our clients actually source the data from scratch. For example, from their suppliers. We're working with a major toy company to help them identify with their suppliers how they can make those products much more sustainable. And they are working across their whole supply chain, sourcing the data, how much carbon is in this doll, and they didn't know that before, and now they are getting to a much better understanding of that, and then how can they reduce that footprint? They're getting closer and closer to really being able to manage that on a real-time basis, which is fantastic.
And that implies, I guess, a lot of work on sharing, common terminologies, sharing common language, across the data life cycle.
And I guess the other way we're helping our clients in this space is around, the huge changes in regulatory reporting requirements. We can bring to our clients a kind of easy to interpret version of what that means across the jurisdictions and when they operate, and then they can create a data catalog that based on that, that actually reflects that and actually changes and evolves with the regulatory landscape. I mean, there's new regulations coming out every month. I mean, every week now. It's crazy. So keeping track of all of this, no organization wants to have to do that on their own. So, I mean, as KPMG, that's one of the things that we help do, right?
Question again. We still have time. We can do that.
Any
yes,
more
please.
questions?
Yeah, over there.
You mentioned the risks, challenges, and impacts, and how the client shouldn't be focusing just on the reporting aspect. So after those questions are cleared away, what is the most common request that you have from your clients?
Good one. Good question. So after they've set out what's material to them as a business and what their new business strategy is going to be, a key thing that we help our clients do is then interpret that into what are the goals, and then from that, what are the metrics and KPIs, and then from that, what is the data that they need to fulfill those metrics and KPIs, and how can we help them operationalize that? That's a really big question now. It's not just about a one-off activity. That might be easy, right? You just ask a bunch of people and they send you some data. This has to actually be embedded through the entire infrastructure. How do we do that? Because this isn't about just getting one new platform and putting it in the middle and you're done. It's actually about pulling data from all of your existing platforms that already are there, right? Your ERPs, your procurement systems, your customer systems, all of these systems need to contribute to that picture. And how do you set budgets around ESG like you do for finance right now? So there's a massive change implication into how decisions are going to be made. Rather than just financial decision making, they need to be made on a sustainable financial basis. Imagine the changes that need to happen across every process in an organization so that people can take that into account in their day-to-day decision making, the data that they need to support those decisions. So it's quite significant, and it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, no client is able to do that on a real-time basis today that I know of, but it's about paving that pathway and starting to get that process in place so that people have enough information to make the right decisions around their sustainable outcomes.
Very good. Are we good on time? Maybe one last question, if there's a little question. I think we're good, though. Well, thanks everyone for attending. I hope this was useful. Obviously, it's a complex issue, so please do get in touch with either me or Natalie. Natalie, thanks for making the trip.
No, thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great speaking to you all, and hopefully looking forward to collaborating on this issue together. And data is fundamental, really is. And just like ESG is like electricity, and so is data. Yeah.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.